Okay, well, let's get started. Really appreciate everyone joining. I'm Dan Gibbs, the Executive Director of the Department of Natural Resources. I appreciate you all joining this quarterly meeting of the Colorado Forest Health Council. We really have a packed agenda, to say the least, and I know we have a few hours to make it through our agenda, so I want to be as efficient as possible. But before we start jumping into all of our agenda items, let's do a roll call just to see who's here to make sure we have.
Copy those. So whether I control C to copy, otherwise right click and hit copy. Back to your Zoom folder, back to the meeting that's currently running. Right click and paste those in there. Now it's going to say, hang on, this has already got two files of the same name. So we'll double click to convert 01 and 02. Replace those with the ones you want to be there. Now you see your files that you want from earlier have now been pasted into this meeting. So go back to your Zoom meeting, end the meeting, and
Director McCombs right here. Matt's here. Good to see you, Matt. Director Morgan. Or maybe a designee from the
Director Gibbs, I heard from DFPC, they can't attend today. They're at the legislature.
Okay. Regional Forester BEM or Deputy Forester Buchanan. Is Frank or Jackie here, or folks from the U.S. Forest Service?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Dan? I'm trying to get my camera. But this is Jackie. I'm representing the Forest Service. Can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely. Good to see you, Jackie.
Good to see you too, buddy.
Okay, Mr. Ring. Is Mr. Ring here?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Good to see you, John. Mr. Macklin. Mr. Macklin. Miss Albert.
I'm here.
Hey, Samantha. Councilmember White Skunk. Okay. Commissioner Layden. Okay.
Hey everybody.
There we go.
I apologize. I do have a hearing I'm running at 1:30 today, so I'm going to do double duty, but I will be listening intently.
Great. Good to see you, Abe.
You as well.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Commissioner. Commissioner Tisdale.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here for, I'm not able to make the whole meeting today because I have a commissioner meeting that overlaps this plus testifying on the Fire Commission bill this afternoon. So it's kind of a complicated day for me, but I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Good to see you, Ben. Commissioner Cooper.
I'm here. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, good to see you, Hillary. Mr. Kemple. Saw Aaron's here.
I am. Nobody's called me Mr. in a long time.
Mr. Birchall's. Okay, Mr. Wolk.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Brett. Miss Burry.
I'm here.
Okay, and Ethan, you're here. Thanks for that. Yeah. I know Amy Moyer has a conflict with another meeting right now, so she's not able to make it. Mr. Morgan. Okay, no. Miss Lewis.
I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Good. Hey, Paige. Miss Walker. Carol Walker.
Hi, Dan. I'm here, Carol Walker. I'm kind of like everybody else playing triple duty with end of session, but I'm on. I'll be listening and kind of trying to pay attention. So call me if needed.
Good. Thanks, Carol. Miss Stencil.
I'm here.
Okay. Hey, Julie. Miss Belton.
I'm here.
Okay. Hey, Christy. Ms. Dorsey.
Good afternoon, Director Gibbs.
Hey, good to see you, Pat. Mr. Jones. Scott Jones. Okay, and then we have Representative Cutter and Senator Quorum. I assume they won't be able to make it because the legislative session is extremely busy right now.
And Director
So how does
Gibbs,
that look?
Councilmember White Skunk just joined us as well.
Oh, good.
Hello,
Okay.
everyone.
Hey, Councilmember White Skunk, good to see you.
Likewise, likewise.
So let's see, Angela, do we have quorum?
Yes, we do. And I'll get our final number here, unless Courtney has it off the top of my head as she off the top of her head as she takes notes.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, let's just move into our first agenda item. But before we do that, actually take a look at what we have before us right now on our screens. Does that look good to everyone? Are there any modifications or anything that you think we should add? Okay, well, let's again, I mentioned this is a pretty ambitious agenda we have in front of us, and I'm seeing a thumbs up from Pat and some others. So let's just go with what we have before us for right now. So our first agenda item is we have the Colorado Forest Collaborative's presentation by Katie Mcgrath Novak. She's with the state, with Colorado State University. And really excited to kind of hear from her. She's the new coordinator for a new network within the Center for Collaborative Conservation. And this really looks at bringing forest health collaboratives together. And so let me just turn it over to Katie to explain more about this new effort and how we can work with this new group. So with that, Katie, I think you have the mic whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. We're super happy to be here. We really appreciate the generous chunk of time that we've been given today. So I'm actually not going to be doing the majority of talking. We've got a couple of speakers here to talk for us. So I'm going to start off by handing the mic to Aaron Kimple, and he's just going to give a brief introduction. And then after that, we have Hallie Strevey from the Coalition for the Purdue River Watershed and Danny Margolis from the Dolores Watershed Resilient Forest Collaborative. And they're going to talk a little bit about their experiences working with collaboratives. And then we'll pull it back to me to talk more about our network. So yeah, with that, let's go ahead and pass to Aaron.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it. And thank you, Director Gibbs, for the time. I'm really excited to see this Forest Collaborative Network coming together and to see the Center for Collaborative Conservation taking on the lead of this group. This has been an effort that our collaboratives across Colorado have identified as a need for a lot of years. I think back to when I started working with forest collaboratives about 10 years ago, and Tony Chang and Brad Peel did a lot of work pulling together and organizing collaboratives every year. We came together and had great conversations. And at the end of that year, we said, we need a way to organize around this great energy and the great minds that are in this room. And 10 years later, I think it's all coming together. I think there's great energy right now around forest health work. The state is doing a great job of wrangling efforts. The Forest Service is really putting its best foot forward as well. But these collaboratives are where the rubber meets the road. Those local voices, those local values are really the place where this work thrives and helps sustain the overall health of our communities across Colorado. So I think this is a really a great opportunity, a great time for this group, for this network to be coming together. My official position, Angela, is I'm the partnership representative. Is that correct? Did I get that right, Angela?
That's a great question. I think let me actually just look at the legislative language. I think the word collaborative is actually in your seat. Let me see here. But keep going as I.
Okay. But to the point being that I think having a way to be able to talk with, or having Katie as a point person who's interacting with the collaboratives on a regular basis, can relay the needs and concerns to the Forest Health Council will be really important. And I'm excited to be able to have that as a resource. And that's really what I have to say. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, John, for taking this on. And I'm looking forward to working with this group. And I think it's going to be of incredible value to the Forest Health Council.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So with that, let's move into Hallie Streevy's presentation. Yeah, Hallie, it looks like you can just go ahead and share your slides.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me here today, everyone. My name is Hallie Streevy, and I am the new Executive Director of the Coalition for the Purdue River Watershed. I've actually been with CPRW since 2015 in several different roles, but have been the Executive Director officially since last September. So I'm just going to give you all a little bit of background on CPRW and how we've gotten to where we are today and the collaborative efforts that we're part of. And then I think we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. So originally we started off as the High Park Fire Coalition. So in 2012, the High Park Fire burned about 87,000 acres in the Purdue watershed. At the time, it was the largest wildfire in Larimer County history. So we had this High Park Fire Restoration group that came together. It was initially this informal group of over 20 entities, including the county, the different municipalities, some nonprofits, landowners, and they came together to prioritize work on the ground to recover from the High Park fire. This initial effort was really successful, and so those initial entities that formed the High Park Fire Coalition decided that there would be a lot of value in having an official watershed coalition. So we became a 501c3 in May of 2013. Our current board is made up of representatives from Fort Collins, Greeley, Larimer County, a local landowner, a branch of Rocky Mountain Flycasters, which is a branch of Trout Unlimited, Carestream Health, the Mighty Arrow Foundation, and then someone who is retired U.S. Forest Service. So our mission has collaboration within it. So our mission is to improve and maintain the ecological health of the Purdue watershed through community collaboration. And everything that we do is really tied to that collaboration piece. We're still a really small staff. We have 4 people right now, soon to be 5, but everything that we do is really led through our stakeholders and our partners. So we have several different programs, including forest and fires. So we have a robust forest and wildfire mitigation program, river restoration program where we're focused on basically increasing resiliency of the river corridor, reducing risk of future floods. Our overarching theme is really everything that we do is tied to that watershed resilience piece. And then post-fire restoration, of course, after the High Park fire, and then now after the 2020 Cameron Peak fire. So we came up with a fun little acronym, collaborate. So CPRW, plan, restore, and watch or monitor. So this is really the core of everything that we do. So this is an image of the watershed. We work from headwaters to confluence with the South Platte. And all of our different partners and stakeholders they're different depending on the region of the watershed that we're working in, whether it's the upper or the lower, and it's also can be different based on the project as well. But in general, we have local municipalities who are partners, the counties, state and federal agencies, researchers from CSU and University of Northern Colorado, different nonprofit groups, landowners, and businesses. So after the High Park fire, we really learned that working together, we have better outcomes. And this slide just kind of shows all the different values, or some of the values that we have in the watershed. So obviously clean drinking water, recreation, agriculture, fishing, transportation corridors, et cetera. So everything that we do is, besides the collaborative piece, we're keeping all of these different watershed values in mind, and that's really what guides our work. So our approach is to facilitate this on-the-ground restoration by collaborating broadly, planning strategically, so then we can prioritize our limited resources. So I just wanted to review some of the different groups that we lead and that we're a part of. So initially we have our Upper Pooter Stakeholder Committee, and this group helps us do prioritization and planning in the Upper Watershed. So we have this prioritization and planning piece, followed by fundraising and outreach and engagement, and then implementation, and kind of repeating over and over again, always going back to that stakeholder committee, and they help guide the work that we do. Same with our Lower Pooter Steering Committee, and this is what we consider everything east of I-25. So that includes the towns of Timnath, Windsor, and Greeley. Similar process. And now after the Cameron Peak fire, we're a part of several different groups, and we lead them to guide our restoration efforts for the Cameron Peak fire. Some of the other collaboratives that we're a part of include the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative, the Prepples Meadow Jumping Mouse Site Conservation Team, the Pooter Runs Through It Working Group, and the Pooter Initiative Group. And then within that, we're always working with the various watershed coalitions up and down the Front Range, private landowners, more recently, ditch boards, and also local businesses. So I'm going to review some of our prioritization projects and planning projects that we've done that have really guided the work that we have done to date. So our Upper Pooter Resilience Plan, we initially completed this in 2016, and this whole effort was guided by the Upper Pooter Stakeholder Committee. And within this, we've prioritized hazards, basically wildfires, and where future wildfire would be at the biggest risk to some of our critical watershed values. So recreation, clean water, water supply, et cetera. And so the darker red areas are the highest risk. And obviously some of this has changed since the Cameron Peak fire. And this map has actually been updated to reflect that. But we still use this plan to guide our work, and our forestry program has been building off of this plan for the past, well, since 2016. And so we've been able to accomplish a lot of really great work using this plan that was built from our stakeholder committee. So this is all just about increasing that forest resilience through a variety of measures. So using volunteer and professional sawers, logging, pile burning, and prescribed fire. Next, our other planning efforts that we are still using to date is our Lower Pooter Master Plan. And this encompasses, again, everything east of I-25 to the confluence. This plan looked specifically at the river corridor. We evaluated hazards, looked for opportunities to improve river resilience. And then within this plan, we did an MCDA analysis to help us basically select 1 to 2 mile reaches. So the whole river corridor is broken up into these 28 reaches. And then we prioritize those reaches. So we're currently working still with this plan through our Lower Pooter Steering Committee
Today's just complicated.
To guide the work. Hey, Hallie, I'm just
Today's complicated.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, hey, Ben. Ben,
There's a lot of.
Tisdale, can you mute yourself?
Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
And then another prioritization plan that I thought everyone would be interested in is the Cameron Peak Fire watershed hazards, treatments, and targeting prioritization plan. So we worked with City of Greeley and a few other folks. JW Associates led this effort. They actually also led our Upper Pooter master planning effort as well. And so within this plan, this is the burn perimeter. We looked at all these different pieces of data. So debris flow risk, the Bear report and soil burn severity, the post-fire sediment yield, and also a composite road hazard analysis to prioritize these sub-watersheds to focus our limited resources. You can see these really small blue polygons. Those were the acres that we completed aerial mulching on last year. We completed just over 5,000 acres, and we currently have funding to do a similar amount of acres this year. I also just wanted to point out how robust the recovery team structure was following the Cameron Peak fire. So a lot of these groups that are listed here are no longer functioning just because their need kind of went away after the fire went out. But it just shows just the whole vast collaborative effort. This water recovery work group is still functioning, though. We're still leading this, and this is guiding all of the work that we're still doing to date, the prioritization, the fundraising, and then the planning to actually implement both the aerial mulching and some of the point mitigation work, which is really all targeted towards protecting water quality. And then I also just wanted to show everyone just all the different agencies and nonprofits that were involved with all of the recovery planning, the communications, the prioritization pieces, the monitoring, et cetera. It's the collaborative effort that went into the Cameron Peak fire and that is still a part of recovery efforts is really, I think it's a showcase for other fires in the future. And it's been one of the inspiring things that I've seen come from this fire. I also wanted to highlight the Northern Colorado Watershed Collaborative. So this list right here is our current entities that are part of the Watershed. So initially the Watershed was really just focused in Larimer County. We have since expanded. We've expanded south and also into Grand County. And the main goal with the Watershed is to really collaboratively plan these landscape scale watershed resilience projects. And so, so we're not just doing these random acts of restoration. When the Forest Service is planning a large project, how can CPRW or other watershed coalitions build off of that to increase that pace and scale of this wildfire mitigation work? And so through the Watershed, we really are trying to build this shared stewardship to protect watershed benefits. So we're building that social license through community outreach and engagement. We have a whole communications and engagement team. We have a website and social media, et cetera. So trying to build that social license to with our communities up and down the Front Range to do this work. And then we have a science and planning committee that brings all of the expertise to the table, and then operations and implementation team. So the last thing I wanted to highlight was just some of these photos of the operations committee working together. So this one map at the very bottom right is some of CPRW's projects. And so the operations committee was building off of some of the work that CPRW and other entities that we've been working with over the past 5 to 7 years, planning off of how we can expand this work. This is actually on the Boy Scout Ranch near Red Feather Lakes. How can we expand this work with future grants? So we're working with all these different entities with the operations committee to put together several different grants this year to increase that pace and scale, that landscape scale of forest resilience work. So I just wanted to end with kind of the challenges that we still face, obviously the funding piece, but really that's always the guiding force. But that collaborative piece, as we're getting closer to achieving that in everything that we do. The Watershed is going to be a big piece of that moving forward. And then this map of the watershed, you can just see the scale of the wildfires that have impacted the watershed since 2012, but there's still a lot of forests left to burn in the watershed and a lot of recovery efforts that are still remaining. And so with these collaborative efforts, we're able to accomplish that work.
Thank you so much, Hallie. So we do have a couple of minutes for quick questions. Angela had thrown into the chat, Hallie, can you define MCDA analysis? That was from a little while back in the slides.
Yeah, that's a multi-decision criterion analysis. So basically, we looked at several different pieces of data. So we did a river health assessment. We did a sediment transport analysis. We also included the Purdue River Trail because that was a really big value to the Lower Purdue community. and then a few others. And basically that helped us prioritize. And then within so we used the MCDA to basically highlight which pieces. So was it the sediment transport analysis, or was it the river health assessment? Which one of those needed to be ranked higher depending on what our values were for the plan.
Thank you. And Director Gibbs has a couple of questions, I think.
Yeah, in terms of the map that showed the reaches of the river sections and how you have it prioritized in various different sections, how did you prioritize those sections? Was it based on social license? Was it based on proximity to water systems? Just, how did you go about that process?
Yeah, so we brought in all these different pieces of data. So we did a river health assessment, which looked at a variety of different pieces of river health. So flows, geomorphology, water quality, aquatic life. And so that was kind of all encompassed into one assessment. We also did a sediment transport analysis. We did a vulnerability assessment. So we looked at low to moderate income communities that were in the river corridor, along with high risk values like hospitals and schools. And then we did another like just broad ecological assessment. So we did pebble counts and things like that. So all those different pieces of data, plus also the Purdue River Trail, because through all of our communications with the stakeholders and the landowners, the Purdue River Trail is just really valuable piece of that river corridor. And so people want to protect it. And so that was also included in our prioritization plan. So all of those pieces of data kind of come together. We can shift them around depending on what everyone's values are. But that helped us prioritize and rank those reaches from 1 to 28. And so we currently are working on the Reach 13 project. And so that was maybe not one of the highest priorities, but it encompassed both the municipalities of Windsor and Greeley. And so this is the one that our steering committee really wanted to go for first. And so we have the 30% design for that project so far, and we're kind of slowly moving along, getting more funding to actually, eventually implement that project. Does that answer your question, Dan?
I'm just unmuting myself. Yeah, it does answer my question. Thanks. And maybe I'll just have a quick other follow-up question. I know there's another question in the chat, and it looks like Christina has a question too. But this group, as I think is, there's nonprofit leaders, there's local government leaders, there's state leaders, and we're here to really help also make recommendations to the governor and state legislators on policies. So my question to you is, it's incredible to see, all the different partners are involved with what you do right now, but what are things that we should think about to help support, not only the work that you do, but other entities that do similar work? If you had a magic wand, how can the state be more helpful, I guess?
That's a great question. I think first, just, like being aware of all the different efforts that are happening. So it's not just CPRW, lots of the other watershed coalitions that popped up after the 2013 floods are still around and doing really similar work to CPRW. So I think, there's still, I know we've done a decent job of collaboration, but there's still people higher up in the state that probably aren't aware of the work that we're doing. So I guess just, helping to spread the word, and the funding piece is still obviously key for us to keep moving some of these projects forward. For post-fire restoration, there's been a flood of funding that's come in from Cameron Peak Fire. And there is going to be as well for some of our forest resilience work, obviously through the infrastructure law. But that's only going to be maybe for the next 5 years. And so there's still so much work to be done. And I think just, being aware of all of these efforts, and especially the Watershed, I think that's going to be really key, not only just for the Front Range region, but I think it's going to be kind of a showcase collaborative for other watersheds and other states in the West, of how to get this landscape scale resilience work done.
Thank you. For the sake of time, is it all right, Christina and Hillary, if you go ahead and ask your questions in the chat, and then we can have Danny start on his presentation. Danny is with the Dolores Watershed Resilient Forest Collaborative, and he's going to give a chat about that area.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. Thanks everyone for having me here today. I'm going to share my screen and okay. Well, welcome. Glad to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity and want to introduce myself. I'm Danny Margolis. I'm the coordinator for the Dolores Watershed Resilient Forest Collaborative down here in Southwest Colorado. We are a collaborative group that works to promote forest community and watershed resilience through collaboration. I've been the coordinator for the group for the past 3 to 4 years, and we have been in existence for about 6 years. And we really focus on collaborating on projects generally in like the northern and eastern part of the landscape that you can see here, really where forests are more contiguous. Through a strategic planning process, we've developed a handful of different program areas that we focus on, and not going to go into them too much right now. I feel like they're going to be covered throughout the rest of my presentation, but want to highlight a few of the partners that we have participating. I think that the diversity of our partners are kind of the core of our group. We have a larger stakeholder group that's with federal agencies, tribal government, state agencies, local municipalities. The forest product industry heavily participates, water managers, fire managers, rec groups, science and monitoring, conservation groups. We also have a coordinating committee that helps kind of coordinate, steer the conversation of the group. It's a good smattering of those different interests represented there. And we have a variety of different working groups, including outreach, kind of community, wildfire risk, prioritization group, and have kind of on and off had a forest products industry working group as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of highlight some of the benefits that I see collaboratives provide. And I feel like I want to highlight is like the value of collaboration is also the challenge of collaboration to me. Bringing in diverse interests, voices, and funding sources to meet shared goals on the ground. So highlighting a few of these things, I think one of the key values of collaboration is articulating and aligning interests. I think that happens formally and informally through documents. It's also just informally through meetings with a lot of different folks that you don't necessarily need to listen to the interests of all the time if you're not kind of meeting with them and focused on like on aligning interests. We've done that through a variety of means, through strategic planning, but also through collaboratively identifying ecosystem resilience metrics and desired conditions for the Ponderosa Pine Zone here, bringing together a lot of different interests to help shape how we have conversations and how we can help influence management actions, both on federal lands, but also off of federal lands too. Another benefit is proactive project development. I think it's through NEPA planning, but also off federal lands as well. In our landscape, there's a huge amount of area, especially in the Ponderosa Pine Zone, that is has recently passed or is going to be undergoing analysis for restoration, for thinning work, for active management for timber harvests as well. And bringing stakeholders, bring these diverse interests to the table on like upfront can have really key impacts in the long term, both for having the right work be done in the right places on the ground, but also ideally avoiding a lot of challenges in the future. Expanding opportunities and more work on all lands. I think collaboratives, especially in Southwest Colorado, have really been instrumental in helping to bring some large-scale initiatives to this part of the state and a lot of additional funding for both federal lands work, but also off of federal lands as well. I want to highlight there are a few other key collaboratives working in Southwest Colorado, just to the east of the Dwarf Landscape, the Four Rivers Resilient Forest Collaborative in La Plata County, and the San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership in Archuleta County have been doing a lot of good work for many years as well, especially Headwaters. And with it, with kind of all of these groups working together, we were just selected for a CFLRP, a Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program recently. One of the RMRI focal areas is down here in Southwest Colorado. And we work with any number of other watershed groups to try to expand work, not happening just on the National Forest and the Ponderosa Pine Zone, but to protect our communities and diverse interests on private lands and state lands as well, which is really one of the most challenging. We found it to be quite challenging at times to get some of the focus off of the National Forest too. And I think it's by sharing these resources that we've been able to really help share kind of the shared stewardship perspective and approach. I feel like an often overlooked benefit of collaboration is just developing questions and learning together. We've used collaborative time and energy to work proactively on NEPA projects to articulate kind of in the pre-scoping process, articulate some of our core questions, articulate some of the concerns, and help work through with partners kind of literature reviews and science presentations on some of the goals that the collaborative group as a whole has and some of the core questions, and have been bringing in resources from outside groups to help support monitoring efforts that help answer some of these core questions around climate change, around the connections between forests and forest health work and water resources, for example. And also have been able to bring together some rapid monitoring work, for example, that occurred post-implementation. There was some concerns expressed about the severity and extent of soil disturbance in a high-use recreation area. We were able to bring in Mountain Studies Institute, a third-party monitoring entity that Aaron Kimple is here with, to help inform an after-action review. And I think that there are these really local needs that can be articulated through collaborative groups that help inform the best work on the ground. Generating dialogue, engagement, and learning with local communities. One of the core conversation pieces we've been having as a group is, so I'm looking at the chat, making sure nothing was there for me. One of the core goals of our group is to maybe change the narrative from how do we prevent all fires from happening in the landscape to how do we more safely live with the reality of fire. And with that, we can't necessarily stop fires from happening, but we can have influence on how and when and maybe how severe those fires can be. And really having dialogue about management actions, what the tools are, and then also hearing directly about concerns from the local community in active management. And I think by building community trust and having those like open dialogues is really how we can support social license on the ground. It's been really one of our core, it's been a core focus of us over the past couple of years as a lot of projects have been getting passed. And I think another often overlooked kind of benefit of collaboration is just having an existing structure. It's a known structure for where land managers, outside researchers, local community members and community groups, state entities, the Washington office of the Forest Service can go to hear about needs, hear about activities happening, and be a communication tool like up and down the chain. For prioritization activities, I feel like since our inception as a group, we've been conducting them and utilizing them, honestly, like to be totally frank, to a variety of degrees. And right when the group started, we completed a quantitative wildfire risk assessment using mapping wildfire kind of behavior and landscape conditions with highly valued resources and assets on the ground. And this has been a core tool for the group for thinking about where priority areas are for action and where wildfire might be really an important tool to try to bring back, especially through like prescribed fire or managed fire in specific ways. That said, we've been, especially with RMRI, we've been conducting a whole host of different prioritization activities from like kind of the classic drawing circles on the map with partners based on different values and activities. With RMRI, we've been completing prioritizations using potential operational delineations developed by Mike Caggiano and some other folks at CFRI, but applying them locally around like, how do we just divide up the landscape into units that have some bearing on the ground, and have been identifying based on the 4 RMRI values, so forests and wildlife, water, recreation, and communities, where some of our priority areas are for action, and then where some of the areas are for kind of where implementation is most feasible right now and in the near term, and where we should be focusing implementation in the longer term. I think what I want to highlight is all of these activities and planning processes have been feeding into all of the on-the-ground work that we've been discussing. Right now, we're discussing and prioritizing a plan for the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program through the DNR, which is a really exciting funding opportunity. We're bringing in all of our partners for that to think about like, how do we focus on especially community values and wildfire risk, and where should we be prioritizing based on that? I think what I also want to highlight is we've been involved in some other prioritization activities. I see Brett on the line today, and we've been working with CFRI and Mountain Studies Institute on trying to update our quantitative wildfire risk assessment to use RADS, so the risk assessment decision support tools through CFRI. And that process is kind of stalled out. I'm the only person on staff with the collaborative, and I think sometimes priorities ebb and flow. And I think I just want to highlight that it's kind of one of the challenges. And what we have is a lot of tools and knowledge and resources through different prioritization activities locally and at our hands. But what we don't necessarily have right now is like one plan or one prioritization to kind of, I don't know, I don't like the term, or like to like rule them all to like one core plan or prioritization. So a number of other successes and challenges. I think I can't stress enough the active partners in our group as the key success, the key value of our group. And also we have ongoing need and articulated need for collaboration. There's a lot of work that is happening, a lot of work that will be happening, and a lot of risk throughout our area. And partners see a lot of benefit in actively participating in the group. Sorry, I have a list here. So want to highlight a few other things. So science and monitoring, we have a lot of local partners and a lot of local engagement in science and monitoring work. And we have engagement with these large landscape scale initiatives. That is a key benefit to our area. We have a number of challenges for sure, largely around funding. I'd say we've been getting a lot of our funding through the San Juan National Forest, through the U.S. Forest Service, which has been really beneficial and hugely appreciated. Trying to diversify our funding, both to have not all of our eggs in one basket, and then also to provide better optics. So there aren't ideas of kind of conflicts of interests within our group is really valuable. We try to get as much local funding as possible, trying to get kind of local community funding. In Southwest Colorado has just been a challenge. It's been easy to get like small, like $2,000 grants here and there, but not for really ongoing support. Engagement with the local Ute Mountain Ute tribe has been, I think we've kind of like fallen down on that to some degree. I think that there's more dialogue, and I think developing that relationship further has been a clearly articulated goal of the group. And then there are just some like challenges of collaboration period that I think we're still trying to work through, largely around like the definition of collaboration itself. And different collaborative members have had different meanings of collaboration, whether it's fully co-developing projects or just providing some influence on projects or information sharing. And I think developing and articulating those expectations from the ground level is something that we're certainly looking at doing better at in the future. So I feel like I could chat and ramble all day. I want to see what questions you all have. And again, really appreciate this opportunity and appreciate this conversation that the Forest Health Advisory Council is having about collaborative groups.
Thanks, Danny. That was super helpful. I really appreciate you going into a lot of those values and successes and challenges. I think for the sake of time, can we just answer questions in chat? I want to make sure that we have enough time for discussion at the end. But you've got a question from Angela and a question from Dan Gibbs. So if you don't mind going ahead and answering those, and then I'll also make sure to put all of our contact information in the chat so that if anyone wants to follow up afterwards, we can definitely do that. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can everyone see that okay?
Looks good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So just to get started, I just want to talk a little bit more about myself. So my name is Katie Mcgrath Novak, and I am the coordinator of the brand new Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network. In my other half time, I work as a research associate in the Public Lands Policy Group, doing forest policy, social science research. I'm super excited to be here. Again, I'm really excited for the opportunity to talk to all of you and to get to know the collaboratives in Colorado a little bit better. Some background on the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network. For the last 10 years or so, excluding last year, there were these forest collaborative summits that happened annually, and people really found a lot of value in just being able to connect with other groups and being able to learn about other people's challenges and successes and advice and stories. And so from that, John Sanderson and Chad Koistra put together this situation assessment to determine, is a Forest Collaboratives Network something that should happen all the time? So I'm going to have John link to this in the chat if anyone wants to read it, but basically they interviewed a bunch of people across Colorado and some people in other states and determined that there is an appetite for a collaboratives network in Colorado. And so we just got started with it in January, and we're hoping to see where it goes over the next 3 years or so. There are networks like this in other states, Idaho, Montana, and then Sustainable Northwest has ones in Washington and Oregon. And these are super well received. They've put on conferences and workshops and just really been of value to people in other states. So we're really glad to have Colorado jump on board. So we've been involved with a number of people. Of course, we are talking to a bunch of forest collaboratives to see what their needs are. Those are the ones in green on that map, but there are also some groups in blue and brown on this map that have some sort of forest component. So we're trying to get as many people involved as we can to see what the needs are, what opportunities that there are, what's already being addressed. And then we've also been in talks with the Department of Natural Resources, the State Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service, private consultants, and those other networks in other states, just to see, again, you know, what people are looking for and how we can best be of use to support collaborative groups. So one of the most important things that I've been doing over the past couple of months is having one-on-one conversations with collaborative groups. And so I just wanted to highlight kind of the top 6 things that I've been hearing they want from a network. Number one, pretty much everyone said that they would like to just be connected with other collaboratives. A lot of them feel like they're just in a silo and they don't have anyone else who's doing what they're doing. And so they thought it would be a really good value to just get to know other groups and what they're working on and what they can learn from each other. They also had interest in a network compiling, sharing, and assisting with funding and other opportunities. Funding specifically related to capacity, but also project-based funding. It's kind of a need all over. And then they also saw a need to compile and share topical information and current research. I think sometimes it's just hard when there's so much information out there to get something that's distilled and really targeted towards forest collaboratives. And then a lot of other people mentioned things like sharing collaborative voices and efforts, both with the public and also at a state or policy level. And then helping groups out with those really difficult facilitation and administration duties, which are very important, but also seem to get lost sometimes when groups are just trying to get work done on the ground. So these are all the things, these are some of the things that they see need for from a network. So these are some of the things that we would like to move forward with. I also wanted to highlight some results from the Rural Voices for Conservation Coalition, the National Forest Foundation, and Sustainable Northwest. They recently hosted a series of listening sessions across the West about collaborative capacity, and they put together this document, which I'm also going to have John share in the chat, that basically highlighted what the key needs are from collaboratives around capacity. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. So one thing that they would like to see is funding and selection and evaluation criteria designed to support groups with diverse characteristics and conditions. One of the key benefits of collaboration is that it is really locally focused and you get those individual community perspectives. And they would just like to see that reflected a little bit more as opposed to having to really narrow their efforts to fit funding applications. Also centering equity considerations, for example, newer groups that are just now developing or groups in areas with fewer resources, making sure that the money doesn't just continue to go to the groups that already have a lot of money. That was really important for people. And then allowing locally adapted tracking, reporting, and monitoring. So again, these are really community-based initiatives. And so trying to make sure that the reporting and monitoring is honoring those local values. Providing local contacts and context Again, just to make sure that those things are being really tailored. And then lastly, they wanted to see support for collaborative support services, which would be things like the network that we're putting together, making sure that those things are well supported as well, which would then create kind of a ripple effect of support for collaboratives. So that was super quick, but now we would like to hear from you. So John and I were taking a look at the Senate Bill 237, and it talks a lot about collaboration, supporting and promoting synergy across forest-based collaboratives, coordinating state funding sources and sharing best practices, and then working on strategies to work at scale through collaboration. And so I'm going to move into a group discussion. And these are kind of the two key questions that we would like to address. First, we want to know what relationship the Forest Health Council would like to have with forest collaboratives. And then also, what ideas does the Forest Health Council have for our network, and how can we help you to achieve your goals? So I'm not sure, is it easier if I stop screen sharing for a group discussion?
Probably.
Okay. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, let's open it up. And again, the question you propose, Katie, is the relationship between the Forest Health Council and the council's collaborative organization.
Yeah, so let's start with that one. What is the relationship that the Forest Health Council would like to see with collaboratives, or maybe where is it now? I see Aaron's got his hand raised.
Yeah, I think just for context, we as the Forest Health Council in the past have really looked to collaboratives to help inform what work we could do. We had that listening session hosted by Carol Acarius and others in prior years. It was really supportive, or really informative, I think, for the Forest Health Council. It helped us to think through what kind of funding we might look at and that sort of thing. And so I think it's an important relationship. I personally think it's an important relationship, and one that we've tried to tap into in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Paige?
Yeah, sort of similar along those lines. I think we have been charged as the Forest Health Council as kind of being an overarching umbrella, bringing together multiple different viewpoints about forest-related issues in the state and providing advice and recommendations and informing priorities. And so it would be awesome to be able to hear on some kind of regular basis if this, if this collaborative were to capture and kind of synthesize interests and priorities of collaboratives across the state. That would be really helpful for us to hear, because it would be a really efficient way for us to, kind of hear those cumulative priorities versus just sort of the different individual perspectives, some of which are represented here, but not all of them. So having just kind of a regular communication line between the council and this new collaborative would be great.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we highlighted a couple of examples here, but there are so many collaboratives out there. And that was something that we have thought of as well, is just, how can we represent these broader voices? Hillary, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I just appreciate the presentations today. I think perhaps I guess your group, Katie, would keep a map of all the collaboratives that exist, and I think, which would be a helpful tool. I think this group, the State Forest Health Council, I see as being a great opportunity to ensure that resources, tools, most specifically the latest up-to-date science on forest health, which has changed dramatically just in the last 10 years, would be extremely helpful to those groups working on the ground. One of the concerns I had coming into this group was that the state sort of already had established their priorities for wildfire mitigation. And, there were some that were on that list, and then many of us were left off the list. So what resources do we have, those of us who are not on the list, who are not being sort of thrown all the resources, what resources do we have to do projects in our project areas, both on forest health and wildfire mitigation, especially when those two things combine? So science, and research, providing that to the collaboratives, and then also how we can work as a group to help provide resources to areas that are not on the state's priority mapping.
That's a great point. That's something that came up a lot in those listening sessions as well. Does anyone else have any follow-up to that? I do think that prioritization piece is really important, especially considering one of the roles of the Forest Health Council is to help identify those state level priorities, and kind of where's that connection?
Yeah, I'll just follow up too. I think, hearing from the collaboratives on what needs they have. I'm curious too, like the funding streams. Every collaborative is so different. Are they receiving dedicated funds from a local, sales tax or mill levy, or support from counties, or state grants, or universities, all the above? And then I'd also be curious, like where the gaps are in Colorado too. Like, is there a particular region that we don't have, a forest health collaborative in place now, that maybe, I know Matt McCombs has a comment maybe after me, but maybe like the state, foresters on the ground, regional foresters, could help communities kind of, be the leader on helping to encourage new collaboratives to be formed.
Yeah, Matt, was your hand raised to?
Yeah, just maybe just a couple of thoughts. First of all, I'm extremely excited about this work. And a community of practice is like one of the most valuable things that we can have in the state as it relates to collaborative development and collaborative success. Building on each other's working models, sharing information, trying not to replicate, work that's already been done, and then strategizing in ways that allow us to sort of, how do you take turns as a state, right? Like how do as it relates to funding and specific capacity that we can surge, that the center can surge in, that the State Forest Service through our field offices can surge in, and get to a point where we're all sort of, we have some level of awareness, or we have a platform to build that awareness about sort of where everybody's at, is around ripeness, around data needs or supports, so that we can continue to advance, to the extent we possibly can, a comprehensive statewide mission towards stakeholder-driven forest health treatment, right? That's sort of right place, right time, and meets the, or is it some degree in alignment, right, with the values and the priorities and the work that a community-based group would do. So two things. One is on this. So thank you, I guess I should say, for moving in this direction. I mean, I have long been a fan of Sustainable Northwest and the work that's emanated out of the Pacific Northwest. They've been kind of, guideposts for many years. And because I'm naturally competitive, I'm looking forward to Colorado swamping the Intermountain, Pacific Northwest, and Coastal West, and collaborative innovation and information sharing. That aside, prioritization, right? So there's been a lot of discussion about this since I've joined the team here. And I think the council here has a great opportunity to continue to dialogue on how do we prioritize effectively across the state, and then put some weight, right, to the extent that we can, behind that prioritization, and give some energy around this start somewhere approach, right? We know, I mean, the Forest Action Plan, right? The State Forest Service is always going to be more than happy to suggest that's a great place to start. And the Forest Atlas and other tools that we've generated in partnership with others is a wonderful place. We're going to continue to start, and is a wonderful place for us to continue to enhance our capacity to have accessible, community accessible, individual citizen accessible GIS applications that allow them to assess their own risk and then take meaningful action through planning and engagement with others. But I think at that, I think we really have to, this group could really spend some time, I think, in the future wrestling with the nature of competing priorities, both in places where we have high density of populations intermingling with the woods, but also being willing to engage the tension associated with like Front Range versus Western Slope and sort of watershed versus traditional infrastructure, those kinds of things. So I think that would be a great place to have some additional support for the center and others to kind of help shape those conversations and move through or at least towards a prioritization process that we can all be supportive of, so that we can start ticking off the boxes of work that's out there that we know exists. And I guess I've sort of lost my train of thought here on what my second point was, but just very excited. And I think that I'd love to see this collaborative network in exchange, which is kind of what I think it could certainly be, as a place to have the collaboratives themselves do some of that prioritization work, acknowledging that there's interdependence, between all of our planning efforts geographically. So I don't know, I struggle with this because that's what it was. Dan had mentioned about this idea of the State Forest Service. We absolutely, through our field offices, want to take leadership, either as participants, as leaders, as conveners, as content and science, sort of application experts. But I'll just be totally transparent that we also we're struggling because of the weight of the implementation, right? Capacity that's going to need to be available when all the funding comes online and all of that planning, both on the federal side and state and private side, comes together here in the next hopefully 12 to 24 months. So we struggle with sort of implementation versus planning, and I think that that's a place where the state agencies could potentially grow capacity through investment, and that could be a recommendation that this group considers. But I'm also happy to outsource that capacity to a better, potentially a better entity that we as a group might define as well and build their capacity. That could be, that could be the center at CSU, that could be other places in the NGO world. But I think that's something we could maybe tee up for wrestling through some of those questions going forward, because we want to ensure that my commitment as the state forester is that every community is benefiting from the capacity that we're bringing to the table, and that every community that has needs around forest health and wildfire mitigation and watershed health is being served, to the extent that we possibly can, and that all needs to, in a prioritized way, are ultimately going to be met to get to that fundamental change in the nature of the landscape that we all, I think, are deeply committed to. And that was a lot, but I've saved up all of my comments for one fell swoop.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. Brett, do you have a question that's related to that, or is yours different?
It's sort of, it's kind of related to the prioritization conversation, but a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about prioritization. Go ahead.
I think that's kind of what we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. Thanks, Katie and John Sanderson and Hallie and Danny for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge. It's great to have this conversation. So I think acknowledging, I think it was Katie, you said there's that bill currently being considered in the legislature to support collaboration around the state, which is great. I think it's been mentioned, collaboratives are the vehicles in a lot of places that get the work done on the ground that the state legislature wants to see and other people want to see done, and want to fund more of that. We've had several recent examples of these large funding impulses that are directed specifically at collaboratives or other initiatives. A couple that come to mind are RMRI, the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, which didn't initially come with funding, but came with a lot of other pressures on the collaboratives. co-swap program. You could even throw in maybe the forewarm program and the recent infusions of funding. I wonder if it would be worth examining how those programs helped collaboratives, but also what challenges they brought in order to inform this council so that we could inform the governor and state legislature how to best roll out future funding to collaboratives, if that's the vehicle to, again, get work done on the ground and make that happen. So that seems like a potential role for your role, Katie, in the CCC at CSU to kind of harvest lessons learned from those past experiences so we don't repeat our past mistakes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's definitely something that we would like to focus on. We've already had talks about furworm specifically because they've just added in a capacity portion to that. So yeah, we would love to move forward on things like that where we can kind of communicate both up to you and then down to collaboratives about those to try and make them more accessible.
Mm-hmm. I'll highlight, we did a small final report. We did monitoring on the Wildfire Risk Reduction Grant Program, which was a precursor to the forewarm program, but it wasn't comprehensive. There's been many more other initiatives larger than that now since then. But
great. Yeah, I'll have to look into that one. Aaron, you have your hand raised.
I do, and kind of building off what Brett just said, and what Matt McCombs was talking about. I do think the strength of the network is really going to be that telescoping view from the state level down to the local level. And that should be a two-way conduit of information. And understanding collaborative needs, how we can best support them, each collaborative, and understanding too that different collaboratives will have different challenges. But that also goes for priorities as well, right? The state's going to have some priority areas, but as we go forward and think through what that means to apply it to the ground, understanding that local conversation and those local values is going to be really important. So making sure that communication flows both ways. And then Matt's point about capacity, staying in touch with the collaboratives, I think is going to be important for helping to support or diversify that capacity or capability to meet those capacity needs. Brett mentioned the RMRI and the work, and some of the work we're doing here in Southwest Colorado. It's really about knitting together the strengths of the local partners and understanding who can support, offer what support where, and play what role to best advance the work. And so that's been a true asset in being able to have those conversations with our collaboratives and understand who's doing what. So some really great opportunities there and making sure that conversation goes both ways.
Yeah, thank you. And that's certainly what we've been trying to get started, and hopefully we can continue to be that go-between. Is there, I guess, like, is there a specific way that you all see that happening, like action items wise? Do you picture us, like what Brett said, kind of going around talking to people, gathering our results and sharing them upward? Or what exactly do you all picture this relationship looking like in practice? Christina has a raised hand.
Yeah, I think in thinking about some tangible things that would be helpful, just a suggestion, but we've been doing, forest treatments in a vast area in Colorado for over 10 years. And it is really tough to be able to say where those treatments went for non-federal land and federal land. So I think being able to tell that story and showcase the accomplishments is really powerful, but it's really hard when a forester has a different definition of what an acre treated is. Is it the property that's treated, tracked in a map? Is it like what actually was worked on? So there's not a consistent approach for tracking accomplishments, and there's nothing to really show in an easy format, like in a map, when we get these inquiries about, okay, Colorado, what have you done on the landscape to change things, to change the trajectory? And I mean, thank goodness for CFRI to be able to help with some of that. But even with their support, it's a struggle. And so I think having a way to track accomplishments spatially, to showcase that story now and moving forward is going to be really important. And we don't have it figured out yet.
That's a great point. Are Hallie and Danny still online? I'm just wondering if they have any thoughts on that, because I know that that is probably something that they've struggled with as well. And then I also see that Matt McCombs has his hand raised. You can go ahead, Matt.
I'm trying to be good. So to that, thank you for Christina for bringing up. So it's this like outcomes versus outputs conundrum, right? And it's a challenge that our friends at the federal side are struggling with. You know, the acres treated, board feet sold, you know, volume sold is never translated very well beyond the bean counters in Congress, in the you know, committees with jurisdiction and the agency, to be like a meaningful measurement of how are we moving towards the trajectory of a more fire adapted, resilient communities and ecosystems that are capable of, you know, in a climate adapted environment or climate change world, capable of providing ecosystem benefits the way that we hope they will. So, you know, the State Forest Service is working really hard to try to figure out how we start to generate outcomes as opposed to just focus on outcomes versus outputs and describe geographically or ecologically or a combination, you know, socially what those changes might look like. But one thing I want to make sure folks are aware of is that we're in the process of getting ready to launch this thing called GeoTracks. I don't know if we've ever briefed the council on this before, but it'll be a geospatial based real-time reporting mechanism that'll be housed in the Atlas, Forest Atlas, that we're hoping can maybe, you know, bridge and morph into a way for the average citizen all the way to policymakers to see in real time what's actually being accomplished in all boundaries in Colorado as it relates to forest health, watershed health, and mitigation treatments, and that just having that geospatial representation might be enough to help start keying people into, you know, what's occurring, what kind of return on investment they're getting for these sizable plus ups in funding. But beyond that, you know, I'm pressing on our staff, and I want to coordinate with the entirety of the you know, the working environment here to also start storytelling associated with that. You know, not just have polygons with specific treatments, but also have some storytelling about what conditions are changing and how like the nature of the landscape is changing. Because I keep talking about this idea of desensitizing the people of Colorado away from this idea that a healthy forest is an unbroken stand of single age, you know, trees, and that, you know, Dan and Director Gibbs, he does a fantastic job with this poster that shows what the forests look like. You know, I can't remember how long ago it is, Dan, that your picture is and what it looks like now, but just patchy conditions and things like that. So if we could sort of not only educate the public and educate our partners in the legislature and elsewhere on not just the outcomes that we're generating, but how it's changing the nature of the landscape, moving us back to some level of natural conditions, but also more resilient conditions. So GeoTracks is something we'd love to brief you on going forward once it launches, and maybe it could be a repository for outcomes that are easily accessible, geolocated, and represented, and could be easily rolled into story map and a variety of other mediums where we could talk out loud. So just, it's freaking cool. I'm very excited about it, and we're gonna, you know, for the first time I think in the agency's history, report in real time what we're doing, and we're gonna try to cajole our friends on the federal side to participate as well with their data. So we're showing boundaryless treatments in real time as well.
That's great. Yeah, and if you have any more information about that tool, feel free to show it in the chat. Jack, do you have a follow-up to that? Jackie Buchanan. Is Jackie on mute? Can anyone else hear Jackie, or is it just me? Otherwise, I saw Brett had his hand raised as well.
I guess I'll just say it's a challenge of tracking treatments that's not unique to Colorado as well. It's kind of all over the country. People are trying to work on this in various levels. So we have.
Oh, I do. Let me see if I can get, yeah, hang on.
There we
Sorry,
are.
hang on. Okay, let's see. 1 minute. Hear me okay?
Yeah, you good,
Okay,
Jackie?
host muted me. Did the host unmute me?
I think you're on now. You want to
Can
go
you hear
ahead?
me?
Oh, we
Yeah,
hear you
I
now.
can hear you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm like, I'm here. And I have been listening, to all this. So a couple of things for us. And I had previous meetings this morning, and a huge part of what we know we have to do better at is this, what are we accomplishing? Because with the bills money coming, and, just on that Front Range project, we got $18.1 million for fiscal year 22. And with that comes a lot of accountability. And I think it was Matt that said, yeah, it's, it's our traditional way of accounting for what we do out there is on acres treated, whatever that definition is, and, CCF. But we are we're switching to this outcome basis. And I think when we talk about what you all can help us with, and Matt, let me jump back, gladly share whatever data you need. That's not even a question, Matt. So I'm going to put a finger back at you. We would never deny, data to the state, so we'll share whatever we have. But as we develop these projects, as we do the upfront work, we've got to be really clear on what we're going to monitor. And then you all have to help us. Well, you got to help us figure out what is the right things we need to be monitoring. We have to make sure we actually do the monitoring. And then Christina, however that can be displayed. But I think when I think about this group, we should all be operating, we should have some operational norms. We should have standards as far as what we say, is how we're going to account for accomplishments. That should be consistent, whether it's federal land, state land, private land, that we should be consistent. So one, I think that's a piece of work that this group can with all the partners, can get behind. And then, the intent of really being able to display it in the same way consistently. So whoever we're talking to, and whether they're looking at, what the state's accomplishing, what the private folks are accomplishing, or what the feds are accomplishing, it makes sense. And so if we could come out of this next year with that kind of operational norms, I think we would be doing the state of Colorado a favor, the citizens of Colorado, and all of us who are trying to do this a huge favor. So I'll take a breath, and hopefully you could hear that. And if you can't, I'll send it.
Yes, we could. Thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to figure that out.
Okay.
Jackie, I don't know if I can jump in, but I'm just curious if some of the federal funds that you and your team are busy kind of planning on how best to get those funds out the door in a meaningful way, and look at different partners. If there are opportunities to use some of those funds for capacity building in terms of building momentum and support for regional and local forest health collaboratives.
Absolutely, Dan. In fact, we were talking this morning because we've got our budget numbers, but now we're trying to make sense of them. But we know we have that 18.1 million, and we actually have the most flexibility around the capacity building piece in regard to how we use the money and the money that's been designated for that. So, and our conversation this morning is, you know, we're behind the curve. And so we are going to lean heavily on those partners and collaboratives, you know, that are either already established or ready to be established, as much as you all can absorb. I think we know that, we recognize that, you know, we're behind the gun on a multitude of fronts. So we, even the conversation this morning was, we're going to have to figure out how to move this money to folks who can take it and help us. So I think that's a big yes, Dan. I think what we need from all of you is, you know, what are the capabilities? What are the avenues? Because I mean, we have that money now. And so anyway, that it's a yes. Still got to do a little work on you know, figuring out some of the hows, but a clear. I think. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
Dan?
you. It did. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You're okay. You're giving me a very thoughtful, I wasn't sure if I needed to say more or not, but yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone's input. I think we could keep probably discussing this all day, but our time does wrap up at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and throw contact info for myself and Hallie and Danny into the chat so that if anyone has further follow-up questions, they can go ahead and contact us. And then just in the future, if you would like to stay in touch with the Forest Collaboratives Network, hopefully you all will through the Forest Health Council, but you can also get in touch with me personally. We will eventually have a website and newsletter. Those will hopefully be coming out sooner rather than later. A couple of summary points that I have. We talked a little bit about communicating collaborative information to the council, summarizing what they're hearing and what they're feeling and bringing it up that way, reporting outcomes, not just outputs. And then prioritization is always a question that we're working on. So those are a couple of the points, and we will be sure to keep an eye on all of those. So Aaron, do you have any closing thoughts?
Just that I'm truly appreciative of this conversation, and Katie, thank you for doing such a great job in managing for this. I think the other things I heard was the need to understand the different funding mechanisms for the collaboratives and how they're getting applied. Thinking about the firm worm capacity and how do we distribute that. It sounded like Jackie was talking about a shared dictionary, so we're all speaking the same language as we go forward with these things, and the need for a storytelling from the local level all the way to the state level as being a big part of this. So, and just kind of mapping out those pieces, including the whole outcomes component that was presented.
Great, thank you for that summary. I wasn't able to keep very good notes while I was going, so I appreciate that. With that, I will go ahead and close out. Thanks again for giving us so much of your time, and I hope everybody enjoys their break.
Great, thank you, Katie. Really appreciate your presentation and others that were part of this. It was very informative and very, very exciting to say the least. It seems like yesterday that John Sanderson and I were kind of talking about these concepts of this potential collaboration. It's awesome to see you in that role and hitting the ground and working with everyone. Just really, really great. So it's about 2:30 something, 2:31. Let's take about a 9-minute break, come back at 2:40, and then we'll be prepared to talk about proposed amendments to the draft bylaws. And then we have some other items as well after that. So let's just take a 10-minute break now. Thanks a lot. See you in a few minutes. Okay, let's start back up now. And next item on the agenda, we have our proposed amendments to the draft bylaws. And thanks so much to those that got their proposed recommendations to Angela. Let me turn it over to Angela now for a brief update, on the subcommittees and also some of the proposed bylaws that we have before us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. So as Dan said, we sent out these draft bylaws a couple of weeks ago, thanks to the couple of folks I heard from who had some great suggestions. And, for those who attended the Colorado Open Meetings Law, one of the things we did learn there is that we need to do all of the deliberative business like this publicly. And so what I've done is I've just captured the couple comments that folks sent in, and we can work through them and decide if we want to make changes, make amendments. Dan, I'm wondering, before we do that, would you be willing to give, a 2-sentence training to folks on the call of how to conduct a vote, basically how to make a motion and how to second and what we'll look for in terms of making a vote? Recognizing we haven't adopted our bylaws yet, but we can approve some of these changes before we do.
Yeah, so happy to, Angela. So normally what you do is a person would make a motion. So for example, one of the voting members of this commission, and you have to be a voting member too, would say, I move that we adopt, it could be Aaron Kimple's motion on, supporting Article 2 as drafted or amendment as presented. And then there needs to be a second of that motion. So then another voting member, let's say Matt McCombs, would say, hey, I second that motion. And then the chair, myself, would say, okay, all those in favor of that motion signify as aye. People vote and say aye. And then you'd say, hey, any of those in opposition, say no or nay. And you capture those votes. And then whether or not that motion passes or fails. So that's how we did it, at the state capitol and when I was a county commissioner as well. So it's basic kind of Robert's Rules of Order, really.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. That's great. And so given that we're on Zoom, if folks can sort of raise their hand and say, yes, unmute, when the time comes. And then we'll ask if if anybody does not approve the motion, and we'll capture those as well. So if everyone's okay with that, we'll move through. So the draft bylaws, they're very straightforward as we drafted them, and our AG staff has taken a look at these as well. I'll walk through them very quickly just to refresh folks. Obviously, we are the Colorado Forest Health Council. The purpose language here is really adopted directly from statute, so our statutory mission to improve forest health in Colorado and provide a collaborative forum to advise the governor and General Assembly on a broad range of issues related to Colorado's forests. And then under powers and duties here for Article 3, again, these are copied directly from statute. So, thank you so much to those who do provide a couple edits on this section or suggestions, but currently this is the statutory language. So we will be sticking with that. But one conversation I did want to table, and I don't necessarily want to have it now because I want to get through these bylaw amendments, but Director McCombs had a good suggestion around, if we have this duty to develop a 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado per statute, but can we have a conversation about, planning on a shorter planning horizon that might be more meaningful to some folks? And so I just highlighted this, and I'd like to have that conversation later on as we talk about priorities. Is that okay with you, Director McCombs?
But of course.
Great, thanks. So again, it just runs through all our duties that are in statute. So the first real discussion point, and here we can just sort of open it up to a discussion. Article 4 just again goes through the members of the council per statute. We had a great suggestion. So, you know, again, on the open meetings law training, our AG staff reminded folks that council members, while they represent sort of a certain body, you know, given their seat. So maybe that's a ranching seat, or, you know, obviously a county commissioner, or maybe they're representing a wildlife organization on the council. Their role is really to act on behalf of the mission of the council versus the groups that they represent. And so, you know, there was interest in, should we incorporate some language about that into this section on members? So I just wanted to open that up for discussion. Does anybody, you know, want to include some clarifying language around the duty to act on behalf of the council as a whole, or how do folks feel about this? Currently, Article 4 it just lays out the members themselves per statute, and then our terms again, which is in statute. Let's see.
Angela, hi, Angela. I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm not very polite. This is Pat Dorsey. I like it as an expectation for how we show up. You know, I just think I think it's good to have the diversity of perspectives that the council has, but I like the idea that we're all pulling together for a common goal.
Thanks so much, Pat. Any other thoughts on this? Anyone feel strongly? And so, you know, if we did include some language, it might look something like, let's see here. Maybe I would add it under here, section 5, section 6, something like, Pat, does this capture your thought?
Yeah, I think that does.
All right. Does anybody have any other thoughts about this amendment?
Angela, this is Brett. I think I support it. I just wanted to clarify there's certain positions that are tied to a person's where they work, as like the director of the State Forest Service, and there's other positions that are not. So if I leave my position, that doesn't mean that I automatically am relieved of my position on the council. That follows me as long as I still want to participate, right? And other folks in that same position.
Yeah, that's a good point. Christy?
Yes, I think it was Pat. Yeah, Pat that mentioned something about at least acknowledging that having this, you know, all of our diverse backgrounds. I think that's a bonus because of what we bring to the table. So can we add something in there about that, you know, we appreciate the diversity and the perspectives that everybody has. However, you know, we're expected to act on behalf of the mission. Yeah, thanks.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Britt, do you still have concerns about how this is drafted given the agency folks?
I don't really have concerns. I just think there might be a difference where the agency folks are here to represent their agency, whereas there's other at-large members that are there to represent the, I don't know if you call it a constituency or a point of view, the things that were laid out in the bill of, right?
What if we change this to appointed council members? So those appointed by the governor.
That helps clarify.
Right. Christy, do you have another thought?
Yeah. Oh, I guess I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I do. So can you guys explain to me what that means, like difference between appointed council members and others? What does that word, help me understand what that, maybe Brett, what that delineation means?
Brett, would you like to go ahead? Or?
It's kind of splitting hairs. I don't think we need to go too much, but there are seats on this council that are reserved for the leadership of certain agencies, the Department of Fire Prevention and Control, the State Forest Service, and so that's not tied to an individual. If the individual in those positions moves on, then whoever comes in that position next is supposed to fill the seat on this council. And then there's other seats that are appointed by the governor that represent, ranching community, forest collaboratives. I represent a academic seat that has expertise in forest policy or something along those lines. But I think I like inserting language that whether you're representing someone appointed by the governor or I don't know what the other ones are called where they're designated, that we all work together towards the values of the council.
Okay, so one last quick question just to help me understand. Not everybody on here is appointed by the governor?
So technically yes, technically no. I guess the way to say it would be that the governor did issue the appointments for the council, which include the specific seats for the ex officio members who represent state agencies or federal agencies. But those seats, the individuals in those seats are not appointed by the governor because they are the individuals who currently fill those seats. So if they leave their jobs, their successor will have that seat.
Got it. Thank you.
And these seats are spelled out in statute, all of the seats are spelled out in statute, whereas the individuals who hold the seats appointed by the governor are selected and appointed by the governor, if that makes sense, as opposed to just being de facto folks who hold those positions.
Okay, I'm getting caught up. Thank you, guys.
No problem. Commissioner Cooper.
Thanks. So maybe if you would scroll down to that, the section 6. It was when I read that, I thought that you were trying to say that we're trying to get participation to move this group forward as a whole, not to move individual interests forward, is what I thought you were trying to say by that statement. And it felt like we were going in a different direction with what that statement meant. So I guess I just want clarity on what this statement was trying to get at.
Pat Dorsey, do you want to respond?
Sure. I was thinking the same thing that Hillary was, I believe, in that the group should show up with good faith to move the interests of the group ahead, to fulfill the mission of this council that we've been appointed to serve and privileged to serve.
So do we think there needs to be some language change here? And if so, Ms. Cooper or Pat Dorsey, do you have any suggestions?
No, I mean, that's how I read the statement, but then the conversation went in a different direction in terms of sort of who's appointed where. So I just wanted to make sure that that's what Pat meant by so I'm fine with that language with that clarification that that's what she meant.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to advance this amendment?
I move to advance the new language of section 6.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Okay, so moving on, try to get through these pretty quick here. The next item I wanted to discuss was, so section 3, after in this members section, says regular attendance and participation are vital to the purpose and effectiveness of the council in carrying out its duties and responsibilities. Council members accept the duty and obligation to attend meetings either in person, by teleconference, or through an online platform, and shall provide advance notice by phone or email if they are unable to do so. And we had a question, should we define what regular attendance means and what advanced notice means? Is there any discussion on this point? Pat Dorsey.
Sorry, I think my hand up was up before, but I also think this was mine. We were going through another set of another charter, and I thought these are some good things to maybe pull into this one. And that conversation related to before there's a problem, would it be a good idea that people know what regular attendance means? Does it mean you can miss one? Does it mean you attend one a year, that kind of thing, just so people know what's expected of them in advance. And we don't create issues for ourselves down the road.
Great. Anyone else have thoughts on this? Anyone have thoughts on what regular attendance means? And does anyone want to define it? Go ahead, Samantha.
Yeah, jumping back to your first question, Angela, I was also wondering if there are any consequences should someone not show up and what that might look like. So I just want to add that to this discussion. But I personally don't have a definition yet, but I'll think about it.
Great question. My understanding is, and I think this is somewhere further in the bylaws, is that if they are an appointed member, and Dan, feel free to chime in here, if they were not participating in fulfilling their duty, they could be replaced. Someone else could be appointed. Dan, is there a formal process you can expand on, or?
I don't know if there's a formal process, but it'd probably entail me picking up the phone and talking to the person and saying, hey, what's going on? Why can't you attend? Or is there something going on I should be aware of?
Thanks. Director McCombs.
Well, I guess to that point, so I'm a deputy director. So if I couldn't attend and Susan attended, would that count as attendance?
Excellent question. I mean, I think it's, again, what the council wants. In these bylaws, we do have language saying that proxies cannot vote. And so, if you were always sending a proxy and it made it more challenging for the council to actually vote and conduct business, then that could become an issue eventually. But I think we're certainly understanding and supportive of proxies for tracking business and realize that things come up.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good feedback. I just don't assume in any way, shape, or form. I don't intend to participate actively throughout. I think this is incredibly important group to have active participation and representation. But is that just like today? A lot of folks are wearing multiple hats, and so that flexibility, I think, would be something that we should. It's just the fact that we're saying it out loud now, I think, is enough for me, at least.
Okay. Commissioner.
Yeah, this is Jackie. So I'm a perfect case because I think in the past, I've always been the one to attend the majority of the meetings, but I think Frank is named. And even today, he's like, hey, you're going to cover these meetings. So I think, yeah, I think we need to be clear. If it's, I think, so like for him, with the draws that he has on his time nationally, it's going to be hard for him to make. It's not that he doesn't want to make them, but it's probably going to be at best, maybe every other one. Or
Jackie,
me.
you're lucky because you are named in statute, so you can vote.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll be quiet. Somehow I thought Frank was named and I wasn't, but is it both of us?
It's both of you because we knew this, you would need this.
You guys are so smart and ahead of us. So, all right, I'll be quiet, but thank you, Angela. I was ready to, like, fade away and not come back. But, I'll be here. Okay.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thanks. So, sometimes commissioners get over and double booked because we have administrative meetings that we can't miss. So the proxy, Lori Hodges was going to be my appointed proxy, since she has a great background and stuff. But if I knew there was a vote coming up, could I jump on the meeting and do the vote, and then have her I do that with other meetings where I kind of listening, but she's really on. And not I do that very often, but sometimes, as Commissioner Cooper and Tilsdale will probably say, that we're just running with our hair in knots and trying to keep our hat on. So I was wondering if that was allowed, and then with us being appointed, I just want to be clear that we can send a proxy, and we should probably let you know in advance, so that person was coming, and then that would count as our attendance. And I just wanted to know if we did jump on to vote, would that count? So thanks.
Great questions. Pat, do you have thoughts on these points?
The only thing, and I typed it in the chat, it looks to me like the ex officio members, because it says the following ex officio members or their designees are part of the council. So that would include the state forester, DFPC, et cetera, could send a proxy, but I don't believe the same is true for appointed members of the council. You're bringing out my future Farmers of America, former parliamentarian. I'm sorry. If you want me to just go on mute and stay there, I will.
No, you just helped me realize I can send a proxy. So continue, please.
Yeah, so that you raise a good point. Let's see here. Right, yeah, so or their designees, so correct. So the ex officio folks can send a proxy, and it sounds like they could technically be a voting member because they are in statute as a designee. And then the appointed members don't have that language. So I kind of want to take just a pulse. Maybe we could do, it's always hard trying to count here. Maybe if folks in the chat, could you put, if you want to have some requirement in here as to a number of meetings you need to attend typically in a given year. And let's just say we have 4 quarterly meetings. So would you expect people or their designees to be at least half, or would it be 3/4 as Ethan suggested? So we have a couple votes for 3/4. Dan, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just don't know if we need to be so rigid. And if we notice there's someone that's repeatedly like not attending for a long time, I'm happy to pick up the phone and say, hey, is this still really important for you, and what's going on? You have 5 other meetings scheduled at the same time. We understand that. And I think everyone knows there's definitely great prestige to be a part of this council. You were selected for your expertise and what we thought you would bring to the table. If everyone, folks are too busy, there's a long list of folks that are willing to step up to participate. And sometimes people get crazy busy in a year, and just can't commit. So it's nothing against anyone, but I would just like to offer some grace and flexibility for folks. You just never know what comes up. And I think people want to attend in good faith. And if, and if they're really busy during half the year, they may miss a few meetings in a row. And for me, that's not the end of the world, honestly.
Jackie, do you have a thought on that? Or maybe your hand's up from last time. Oh, there you go.
No, my hand was up from last time. Sorry, Angela. Zoom, I'm used to Teams, and so Zoom always throws me for a loop. So
No problem at all. Pat Dorsey, what are your thoughts on Dan's suggestion that he'll pick up the phone if somebody's having difficulty attending?
I am comfortable with whatever the chairman of this council wants to do. I also understand. I mean, I would prefer to give people grace and be flexible, just trying to avert a problem down the road.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So do we think we need a motion to strike this suggested amendment, or should we just move on?
I think it provides grace in the way it is stated now, and I'm fine with keeping that sort of, I think this summarizes what Director Gibbs stated, so I'm good with leaving it in.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is Ute Mountain. Councilman White Skunk from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, who has been appointed by the governor to sit on this council, and the membership, how it's consistent. As I represent the Southern Ute Tribe as well as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, we wear many different hats in our leadership role, just as any political elected official. And when I took on this role, and what was before me was the requirements, and I took that very seriously as to the appointment, and I thank the governor for appointing me, and the Southern Ute Indian Tribe allowing me to represent them as well. It's very difficult for me to have a proxy, because I have to collaborate with the two tribes in what the initiatives of this council is going to be. We haven't talked about, the tribes as to what their issues and their concerns are as we go along this road, this trail that we're trying to blaze. So in the membership and the attendance for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe myself, I don't have that luxury to appoint a proxy, or I don't have an alternate to sit on this. So I make it a point that I have to be in attendance to this to fulfill my obligation to this council. So how the bylaws is written is what I'm comfortable with. But again, it's going to take consensus to move forward in how these bylaws are structured. The uniqueness of the tribe is you have a tribe with its own government, and you have the state with its own government, and to allow the tribes to participate in this council for all of Colorado, and including the tribes, really sets us in a position to be in attendance, because everything that we're talking about and the initiatives and the presentations that are given, I elaborate with Southern Ute Tribe, as well as with my tribal council and my natural resource department, as to what the state is doing or this council is doing with the different groups. So for me, on this council, I think that leaving the language the way it is comfortable with me, and I accept that. So I just want you guys to know that from our perspective, from the tribe's perspective, I will accept what's put forth to us, and I will actively participate when needed. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember White Skunk. So I hear that folks are okay with leaving this language as is. Last chance for any opposition. All right, we'll just leave that as is. So I'll come back and clear that up. Okay, I'll try and move through this pretty quick here so we can get on to our subsequent agenda items. So a couple other points here on quorum. You know, we state that a quorum is necessary to take a vote on any matter. And again, I believe Pat Dorsey, this was your question, is voting the only form of action? And that's a good question. Are there other actions we think would require a quorum that people can think of? Or Pat, did you have any other thoughts on this?
No, I guess my point of that question was, if we don't have a quorum, do we have a meeting?
That's a good question. What do others think about that? And currently a quorum is a majority of council members. So in our case, that would have to be 14.
As much as I like time to be freed up in my day, I feel like if we're gonna carve out the amount of time, and if you guys have gone to the effort to put together an agenda, I would prefer go ahead with the meeting and then we just not make any decisions if we don't have a quorum.
I agree too.
Okay, great. Samantha agrees. All right, so it sounds like we are okay with that. Yep. Okay. So next one on meetings. So we have the executive director of DNR, which is Dan, or his or her delegate shall chair council meetings unless the members agree that another member will serve as chair. Are people okay with this language? Director Gibbs, I suppose I should ask you first.
So what does this mean?
It basically just means you are the chair. You're always the chair unless you delegate someone, or unless something happens to you for some reason, you know, crossing your fingers not, and you have not delegated a chair, and then the council could vote on a chair for the meeting.
Yeah, I'm okay with this. And I was just thinking too, like, we're all busy. So if I'm with Jackie and Matt, out fighting a fire, I may say, Hillary, can you chair this meeting? Or Brett, can you chair this? Or Pat? No, Hillary, you don't want to.
Just kidding. I will fill in any way possible if you're called out on another fire there, Director Gibbs.
Brett, good question in the chat. Yes, I think we can go further down, but there's later language that talks about staff support. Yes, I think that is possible for us to hire a third-party facilitator. I will say there's currently no budget specifically associated with the Forest Health Council, so that's not going to happen in the near term, but perhaps in the longer term. So it's a good suggestion. Okay, so sounds like we're all good with this. Next here, section 4 of the meetings portion, the agenda or order of business may be changed by the chairperson or by a majority vote of the council members present. Are people okay with this? This is just about adopting new agenda items at the top of a meeting. I'm seeing some head nods. Yeah, I know this is administrative, but thumbs up, just making sure people are okay with how it's laid out. Flexibility is good. Great. Okay, Article 6, committees and task forces. So again, this is all pretty boilerplate language. Committees of the council may be established as needed by a vote of the council. And notably, I think, we use the word committees here. So we have had some conversations about establishing subcommittees. I would move that we start just calling them committees because we are a council and we will have committees. And then we also have this option here for special, so committees, I think the understanding is that they would be committees of council members. We also have the option of having special advisory committees, which can be created to advise and confer with the council concerning specific topics. special advisory committees may be established by a vote of the council. And what's unique about them is that they act in an advisory capacity to the council. They meet with the council at least once a year, and they may include non-council members. So a special advisory committee could bring in, technical experts, for example, who are not council members, who could then provide advice to the broader council. And then has no decision-making authority as well, I think is an important caveat here. So how do folks feel about, thanks so much, Paige. Sorry, that was a direct message, but how do folks feel about these subcommittees or committees, sorry, committee structure? Does this make sense? Do folks have any issues or want to add anything or subtract anything?
Sorry if I don't remember this, but do we take a vote already on the subcommittees that you are the 4 subcommittees that you're already polling on?
So we have not yet, which is why I have not scheduled their first meetings. And I was going to, for at least the 2 that we've established today, if people are comfortable with that.
Got it.
And good question in the chat, Samantha. That's a question I'll have to take to our AGs. I'm not sure if special advisory committees need to be subject to open meetings laws. Any other changes to this? Or do people feel okay about this language? All right, so I don't hear any concerns. We're gonna move on. Okay, voting and balloting procedures. And thanks, Ethan, for following up on that. Yeah, it sounds like they probably would. Christy, go ahead.
Okay, backing up to the special advisory committee. Just kind of understanding what roles are and who does what. Would the collaborative folks that we just heard from, would they be considered a special advisory committee, or are those folks, they're not part of the council, I don't think. I'm a little confused about their role and what we're supposed to do with them. Would they be considered a special advisory committee?
That's a great question. So the council can invite anyone to come to a public council meeting and provide a presentation, which is really what we saw today. And so I think if you wanted them to form a special advisory committee on collaborative groups, for example, that was going to meet with the council at least once a year, to provide their insights on collaborative groups across the state, the council could vote to create that special advisory committee. So it's just a bit more formal, and they would have to have, fixed times and places for meetings and report those meetings to me. So it's just a bit more formal than having an individual presentation.
Okay, so today was just information for all of us. Nothing we're supposed to do with it.
Not necessarily, but it could advance the council's business.
Okay, thanks.
I'll just add, if I may, Angela, it's a special advisory committee is similar to like the fire council formed a special advisory committee on examining wildland urban interface codes. And so they looked at, who is a part of the fire council that wanted to be a part of the subcommittee, but there was the flexibility to bring in other people that were not members of the governor appointed committee that could add some level of expertise. For example, it could be special districts, it could be forest health collaboratives, it could be whatever. But we'll have special guests speak and stuff all the time, but they won't be considered a special committee or anything. It's totally separate. And this group would decide, like, hey, do we need to form a special committee to really look into this particular issue or that issue?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any final comments on committees? All right. So moving on here to voting and balloting procedures. We talked a bit about this before. So in an instance in which a vote is called for, the chairperson may call for a show of hands or voice vote, and such voting method shall determine the result of the vote. So I apologize, Director Gibbs, you should have called that vote previously, but we have here no proxy or absentee voting shall be allowed. Now, my interpretation would be that because statute allows the agency members to have a designee, that designee's votes would count, but that proxy members for appointed members, their votes would not count. So I want to have a discussion about that quickly here. How do folks feel about that? Are they okay with this? I see one thumbs up. Do folks want to give me a thumbs up? You can, or a yay in the chat if you are okay with this, or speak up if you think this should be different. All right, I'm not hearing any opposition, so I think we can move on. Great, so there is a section on training, basically saying that we will receive annual training on, reminders of what our statutory duties are, managing conflicts of interest. That's something we'll have to make sure we do a training on soon. The Colorado Open Records Act and Open Meetings Law, as we did last week, and the video was sent around for any who could not attend. And then, so the final decision here, I think, is just on how often do we review our bylaws? Do folks have thoughts on this? Annually? Twice a year?
Definitely not twice a year. If we only are meeting 4 times a year, then yeah, maybe once a year, or maybe as needed.
As needed. Sure, I'm happy with that. So we have the bylaws may be amended in whole or in part at a council meeting by vote. Adopted amendments shall take effect immediately. Does that capture the as needed? Great. All right, I'm seeing lots of support for that. Perfect. Okay, so that's it. So we will, it sounds like people are happy with these. I'll clean these up and we can send them around for signature. But before we do that, Chair Gibbs, would you like to would you like to establish a motion to pass these bylaws?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And before I do that, though, it doesn't have to be a part of the bylaws, but we do have, for a lot of our boards and commissions, a code of conduct as well, that Angela, why don't you and I, after the meeting, take a look at that, and that can be, again, separate from these draft bylaws, but it's something that we're adopting in a lot of, the DNR has a lot of boards and commissions, water and wildlife and oil and gas and so forth, and we're starting to adopt more of these, just so that everyone can get along nicely at the end of the day, honestly. But I'm happy with all the feedback on this. So with that, let's I'll make a motion to adopt the draft, these bylaws that we have before us as amended.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor signify as aye.
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 And any in opposition, please signify as no. Okay, the ayes carry it, and we've adopted this. Good job, everyone. Bylaws can be very painful, so thanks, Angela, for helping to walk through this. It was less painful than I remember last time discussing bylaws. So next up, we have legislative updates, and Angela, why don't you kick this off?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And thanks again, everyone, for working through that. I know it is painful. So we're running late on the agenda, but that's okay, because getting these bylaws passed was definitely one of my top priorities today. So I'm going to share a spreadsheet of forestry bills that are moving through right now. I think the most time efficient way to do this might be to ask first if there are any specific bills that people have heard about that they have questions about, or have heard just rumors about and want some clarification on. So I want to open with that before I kind of launch in.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know I actually was asked to go testify on the 206 bill that's being spoken about right now, and I'm wondering if Commissioner Tisdale's doing that. But I hear there were some amendments, and I was wondering about just, I don't know, the expense of that, and just kind of having another office for resiliency when we already have some of those set. And I didn't know what thoughts were from the department on that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. So SB 22-206, which we don't have lined out in this spreadsheet because it is much bigger than a forestry bill, but I can share the link to that bill. It is a broad-reaching bill that would establish a new office of disaster recovery in the governor's office, and I may be getting the terminology slightly wrong there, but and climate resilience in the governor's office. And my interpretation of it is to help the governor's office ensure they have some point people at that level to respond to disasters when they occur, but also help the state plan for what we are seeing obviously are increasing climate change related disasters into the future, which does include wildfire. And so my understanding is that that office will coordinate quite closely with DOLA and their office, their CRO, the Colorado Resiliency Office, as well as DHSEM on sort of disaster planning and response, but also climate change adaptation, I think quite broadly. And my understanding would be that DNR's work, which we already do a lot of climate adaptation work, especially on water. It's a part of all of our water management and policy decisions. We would sort of feed recommendations up to that level, and that office would be charged with making some of those just higher level policy decisions when it comes to disaster response. So that's one part of the bill, but then the other important part, and Director Gibbs, I think I'm okay to share this because it has been shared with, well, it's literally going to be introduced like right now or within the next couple hours, but there will be an amendment to 206 that will propose a statewide wildland urban interface board to establish WUI codes. So this is, again, being introduced as an amendment, we believe this afternoon, but it is the recommendation that's coming out of the Colorado Fire Commission, their WUI subcommittee, to establish a statewide WUI code board that would set minimum codes. And that's sort of the minimum information I can share right now, but I'm happy to dig up additional information for you on that.
No, that's fine. I just kind of wanted to hear kind of how you guys kind of synthesized it. I know they're testifying right now, and just there's just a lot happening in the last 2 weeks of the session. There's a lot going on, so a lot changing last minute. So we have a bill too we're trying to get done. So I just wanted to kind of just get some thoughts on it. Thank you. I appreciate your insights on that.
Sure thing. Do others have specific questions? Brett Wolk, I know you thought there might be a bill around capacity building, and I might be getting that wrong, or collaborative support. Oh, I see Brett's away from his computer. Any other specific questions about bills? And if not, to save time, I might volunteer that we share out this spreadsheet with the sort of latest info from last Friday on the forestry bills that are moving through, so you can work through it on your own time and ask DNR's ledge staff or Carolyn Aspelin, who's on the call today, if you have specific questions. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll do that. Great. So now I think we'll move on. Director Gibbs, what's up next on the agenda?
Yeah, next up is agency updates, and that's really an opportunity for folks to kind of a round table discussion on items that you think would be topics that you think would be kind of the good for of this council to understand, or updates, topics that you're working on. And, you know, I can maybe kick it off. And a couple of weeks ago, it was really exciting. I was able to join Jackie and Matt and some others. There was top leadership from USDA and Department of Interior, including Secretary Howland, Senator Bennett, Congressman Neguse, Senator Hickenlooper, Governor Polis, with, you know, exciting announcement that came out of the USDA on, you know, federal funding for a 10-year wildfire crisis strategy. And that was really exciting to have that announcement here in Colorado. And I don't know, Jackie, if you want to give us kind of an update on that and that announcement. Oh, here we go. I think you're on mute still. Yeah, we go.
Okay, sorry. It is slow going here. You know, it was absolutely fabulous day. In fact, I just did a couple of write-ups this morning about it. It was a joint secretary. You know, there were actually multiple pieces, you know, of that day. The first part being the joint fire brief, national fire brief between DOI and the Forest Service. Normally happens in Boise. And then the second was the rollout of our bills, the bills money, and the 10 priority landscapes that were selected, one of which, of course, was here in Colorado on the Front Range. And then we had the roundtable by Senator Bennett. So just super positive day. You know, had a few little twists and turns in there. Both secretaries were supposed to be in person, and Secretary Vilsack, I got called Saturday morning and he had tested positive for COVID. So redirect, right? And we ended up doing part of it virtual, but just super, really positive, great showing by partners. You know, when we made the call, Dan, you and Matt and folks, you know, came up really quickly, and you know, we were trying to manage. We couldn't tell you everything that was going on because we didn't want to get in front of the secretary. But long and short of it is, we have $18.1 million coming in fiscal year 2022, you know, to start our project work on that Front Range. Now, as I said, we are scrambling, and we know we're going to need the help of partners and you know, everyone collectively to figure out, you know, how to move forward, do it the right way, get the biggest bang for the buck, make those dollars count, and demonstrate that with enough time and enough money, we can change the outcome, right? That's what we're all trying to do, is not have another 2020 fire season in Colorado. And so we've got a lot in front of us. We have gotten our budget numbers. I'll tell you all, there's a little bit of, we didn't, you know, we're getting the bills money, but we actually are down in quite a few accounts. I'll just say that, which is not what we expected. And we're formulating a response to the Washington office, but, you know, where we thought we would have, you know, our normal, at least status quo as from what we had last year, we're actually down from what we had last year in multiple categories. And we've got the bills money, but it's got some pretty high expectations for very specific things tied to it. So we're trying to figure that out, scrambling. I think we told Frank we'd have a write-up and a comparison for him by the end of next week. But you know, nothing's ever that easy, right? It isn't just, you know, you're going to get a whole bunch more money here and everything else is fine. So we're scrambling a little bit, working on that. But it's still exciting, right? I mean, $18.1 million. And that's, again, just this year's allocation. We should get more the next 9 years. You know, good things. But I've never felt as desperately in need of partners as I do at this moment. I'm going to be running point on that, along with Tara Humphreys is going to be helping me manage that at the regional level. So Angela, you know, you and Dan and folks work closely with Tara, and it made sense for her to help us kind of manage that. But we'll be working with the ARP, and we'll be working with the Pike. And so, and I just have to say, y'all, we are really, I'll just do my agency piece here, Dan, but we are really concerned about fire season and what's coming. We had our risk meeting yesterday, and you know, we had a burnover in Nebraska this week. We fire chief passed, and I think it was an EMS that was burned severely, and so that's here. That's part of our area, part of our region. Dan Dallas's team is out. Things are awful in the Southwest, in Arizona and New Mexico. 4 type 1 teams out, way ahead of, you know, normal schedule. And so, you know, I think for us, we're trying to think how to be as flexible as possible. We got to do both sides of the work. But it's getting, you know, I'm more nervous than I thought I would be, because I kind of was thinking this year might give us a little grace, but not quite shaping up like that. And every time I hear the snowpack's coming off earlier and it's going to be less, that heightens that worry a little bit. So anyway, I think all that, there's a lot of positive in there. There's some concern in there, and you know, the good thing is we're in it together. But that's kind of the Forest Service world at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. It's very exciting, to say the least. Other updates that folks have that want to share, whether it's agency updates or nonprofit updates or other governmental updates.
Hey, Dan, this is Matt.
Yeah,
maybe
Matt.
I'll go real quick. I apologize if it's a little windy. I'm now walking across campus for a 4 o'clock meeting, but I just wanted to get folks, you know, kind of dovetailing on what you reported out on and what Jackie was talking about. You know, we're in a sort of a furious engagement around a variety of components of the infrastructure bill. I just want to give folks kind of a heads up where things are at, in particular around the community wildfire defense grants. We had a briefing last week with the National Association of State Foresters that's running point on policy development for that program inside infrastructure. That, for folks' awareness, that's a $1 billion pot over 10 specifically designed to support the development of and implementation of community wildfire protection plans, amongst other wildfire mitigation related activities. And so we're in the early stages of trying to figure out what the best mechanism will be for us to engage on that program. We have to make a call on taking over administrative support or opting out and letting the Forest Service sort of run point. And we're having that discussion internally with our friends at NASF to try to figure out what the best fit might be going forward. And luckily, if the state wasn't to, or State Forest Service wasn't to opt in this year, we have the ability to do so in the future. But the just for transparency, they're building that program kind of as the, you know, the plane is in the air. And so it may be to the state's advantage to maybe take a year to let things settle down before we step in and try to take on another administrative burden associated with new programming. But the exciting part is that it dovetails really nicely with some hiring that we're doing in response to the 21 sessions investment in Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities program to build capacity inside the State Forest Service to support communities with CWPP development and implementation. So we're hiring 2 wildfire mitigation specialists and 4 community wildfire protection program support folks that will be spaced out across the state to help support communities revitalize their plans, acknowledging that the new CWPP guidance that the State Forest Service has released specifically says, you know, anything over 10 years old is not is no longer viable for grant applications, other things. So we know that we've set a high bar and we want to create capacity to support communities to revitalize those plans so that they're modernized, taking all of the most relevant science and data that's available to us, as well as the prioritization work that's done across the state. That was one piece. And then the other one I just wanted to highlight was we went out and met with all of the individual forests with a new G&A program, Good Neighbor Authority program lead. Sam Mcgrath used to be the supervisory forester in Gunnison, but now leads the G&A program for the state, and was able to sit down with all of our forests across the state and kind of sense out where we might move forward with G&A opportunities to continue to help our U.S. Forest Service partners in meeting the moment and surging in some capacity, much to Jackie's point, to help us to be as effective and efficient as we can with these historic investments. So just wanted folks to know that those conversations are ongoing, and we're pulling together a meeting at the regional office to maybe kind of hammer out hopefully some commitments, and that'll give us something to shoot towards and plan together around as we look at cross-boundary treatments at scale, not only in these priority areas, but across the state of Colorado, especially with watershed health as a key focal area, because I'm very, very cognizant of our need to continue to balance our investments and our focus to ensure that the entirety of the state is benefiting from this unique moment in forest management in the state. So those are just two things I wanted to highlight, and would take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate those updates. That sounds just incredible. Other agency or other updates? I know, Angela, I know you have some updates on co-swap and shared stewardship. Maybe we should turn over to you, and then others think about if you have other updates as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'll do this real quick. So real quick update on co-swap, the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, which hopefully most of you are familiar with. Again, this is a stimulus funded program run out of DNR EDO, but in partnership with the Colorado State Forest Service and Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And so we released our Landscape Resilience Investment Program. These are one-time funds to 7 strategic focus area counties, as well as the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative areas of the state, which you can see on that map there, in March. And really, this is meant to fund large landscape scale work, really looking to fund $700,000 to $1 million per focal area out of an $8 million budget, with some support for capacity to actually run these projects. So we've been in conversations with all of these areas, and we're very excited to see the proposals that we get here later in May. And then the other half of our program is focused on workforce development, really with the Department of Corrections Swift Crews, as well as youth corps around the state. We also have some funds for training opportunities. And we're very excited that by this week, we've awarded 28 awards total, a combination of Department of Corrections Swift Crew, hand crew work, as well as Conservation Corps work, and a couple training projects as well, totaling just over $3.5 million and 3,000 acres. So we're feeling really good about this program. We've had a lot of interest. And we're thankful that there is a bill moving through right now, and the number is escaping me, but I'll put it in the chat, it's gonna come to me, but could bring $2 million additional state funding to this program to continue the workforce development portion for the next couple of years. And the same bill also includes $3 million for Good Neighbor Authority projects with the Colorado State Forest Service that Director McCombs was just discussing. So we're excited about those investments, and we're hopeful that they'll be able to continue these programs. So I'll stop sharing. The last update that I have is just on shared stewardship. So, shared stewardship is something we talked a bit about in our first meeting. Really, it's the state and the U.S. Forest Service coming together to set some mutual goals and work towards those goals together, which we're already doing, but we do have a need to sort of set more concrete and measurable goals. And so we're moving through a process to do that, to develop what we call wildly important goals. It's a goal setting structure that the state uses. So we've established some subcommittees to do that, but they are going to bring those draft goals to the council, and we're actually going to use all of you really as the vetting, our first sort of vetting point to share those shared stewardship goals. Give us some feedback on what maybe needs to change before we cement them. So I just want to make you all aware of that. You'll probably be hearing about it later this summer. Hopefully we'll have them for you at your next meeting in July. So that's it for me. Director Gibbs, I think we want to sneak in some business here to establish our committees. Good question, Ethan. Is there a conflict of interest if you're serving on the shared stewardship subgroups and the council, as Ethan is? Good question, Ethan. I think you could recuse yourself from any vote that the council might make on the shared stewardship goals if you're comfortable with that. And thank you, Carolyn. HB 22-1379 is the bill I mentioned with funding for co-swap and the Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Fund. All right, that's it for me, unless anybody else has important program updates.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Any other program updates that folks would like to share before we move on to the next agenda item? Samantha?
Yeah, I just have one quick one for everyone. So the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office, which is my office that is part of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, has a little under $5 million grant that came through from the Economic Development Administration. And a portion of that will be for infrastructure support. So I'm sharing that with you all in case you have communities or folks, partners in your communities that could benefit from that tie back, of course, to forest health and fire mitigation, water support, whatever it is you need. So happy to share that info out with you, Angela, if we want to get it out to people, but just flagging it here for everyone.
That's great news, Samantha. Yeah, thanks so much. It's awesome. Okay, any other agency updates? Okay, let's move on to discussion on leveraging resources. I know some of you signed up for both the legislative subcommittee and subcommittee on leveraging resources, but I know Paige Lewis wanted to kind of tee up a larger discussion on investments. And so let me turn it over to Paige. Which I don't know if I see Paige Lewis anymore. Where's Paige?
Oh, she had to drop off at 3:30.
Oh, okay.
Now that I remember, she put in the chat. That's all right, Director Gibbs. I'm wondering, before we open this discussion, would you be willing to advance a motion to establish the two committees that we've been working to move forward with? This is a committee on leveraging resources and a legislative committee. So we need to establish those per our bylaws. And if anyone else would like to advance the motion, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just do it quick. I move that we create both a legislative subcommittee and a subcommittee on leveraging resources.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no or nay. Okay, the ayes have that. So we've created that.
Great. So I'll move forward with getting those meetings scheduled. But I think, what Paige really wanted to bring up in this meeting, I think to sort of set the committee on leveraging resources up a little bit for their conversations internally, was, given the programs that we just provided some updates on, what questions do folks have about the potential to leverage resources sort of between state and federal funds or other resources, local resources, or what sort of strategies do folks want to make sure this council can help support that will advance the leveraging of some of these resources? And lots of you on the call have much more experience with this than I do. So if anybody has specific thoughts about what they think the committee on leveraging resources can really focus on and potentially provide some benefits on, we can have that discussion here in just in our next few minutes.
Maybe I'll jump in first, but I think a lot of this is sharing information that we understand who's working on what. So I'm looking at, Christina, with Denver Water. I mean, a lot of the projects in my community that the Forest Service, works on are really funded through the Forest to Faucets program. But if we have a good idea of where those projects are going on, then you can leverage potential county funds, and you can leverage furworm program or potentially co-swap, and other maybe nonprofits and so forth. And that's what I think the real value of this particular group, when you have stakeholders from a broad range of leadership in tribal governments and state governments and federal and really quasi governmental and nonprofits. What we can accomplish together is amazing, but it takes some work to understand, okay, what projects are you working on? And Samantha's comment too of the OEdit, like, hey, would this component work for this project we're working on? And does it really tie into OEdit's needs as well? So I personally think it's a lot of sharing information. Hillary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just really simply a location where we can go to find out what resources are available. My staff, natural resources staff, and myself at the county have sort of been trying to navigate, what's available for forest health work, what's available for wildfire mitigation work, what's available for watershed health work, and it's been, we have not been able to find a one-stop shop to get to get those access, to get that information, whether it be at the state or federal level. So that would be a huge resource for the collaboratives, and then just for some of the smaller collaboratives that aren't quite as formalized or funded as some of the larger ones.
Yeah, good point, Hillary. Christina, and then John Ring.
Yeah, I think building on what you said, Dan, just sharing that information. Denver Water is getting ready to plan for our next 5-year Forest to Faucets. So we're dedicating $3 million per year to that. That's going to be matched dollar for dollar by our partners. So I want to be able to communicate to especially like Summit and Grand County that there's still resources available. That I know that there's been some hard feelings about some of the wildfire strategy decision, coming to the Front Range initially. And so I think it's, from my perspective in leveraging resources, I think it is that information sharing. We've found success at being able to share information at the county wildfire councils. It seems like most of the counties that we engage with have some form of wildfire council. And so being able to get the State Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service, National Forest staff, the water providers all at those county wildfire council meetings, I think has been critical to having that exchange. But certainly I think it's also thinking about things in terms of each other's values at risk. So I think the perspective that's been shifting for us lately in leveraging resources is that we used to look at things based on like a wildfire risk perspective. However, what we're seeing is just that all, goes out the window. We have to think about our values at risk. And so I think it's really having conversations about where those values at risk align among the different partners that could leverage each other's resources. So just to kind of frame it up, that I think having the discussions at the county level, it has been a successful way to do that. And I think approaching it from conversations about values at risk for each partner and being able to see where those align. Thank you.
That's great points. John Ring and then Pat Dorsey.
Yeah, thanks. So I agree with everything that's been said, as far as prioritizing, communication, all that good stuff. But I think we're kind of forgetting one thing, and that's on the back end. Who's going to do all this work? I mean, there's millions of dollars going across the whole West, and we're going to be stealing contractors from each other. So I think something that the community needs to talk about is how do we get more players into the game, so to speak. There's only a finite amount of people that can actually do this work, and I feel like that capacity has to be built as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks, John. Pat?
Yeah, and I'm also going to build on what's been said. I think there are opportunities when we share information to do some pre-planning as well, so that when the work is being planned, to John's point, if there are only so many contractors out there, once they finish up on the Forest Service, they can move to BLM or they can move to private land, and we're using those resources wisely. I think there are other opportunities. I know when it comes to matching federal dollars or state dollars, there's a lot of in-kind match that could go. We're all working on the same landscape, and we could be counting the work that's happening on one project that's maybe overmatched to match another project that's undermatched. And as a private organization too, I'm, I wonder if there's capacity or interest in this group, or we could look at a way at pulling it together where we could establish some sort of a, corporate donation fund. So we're not doing it project by project, but it actually is there to fund projects statewide. Whether it's with ski areas or it's with, bottling companies or whatever that is. I think there are a lot of opportunities. I know that the state can't do that, but some of your partners can. So, just a way that we can think about that.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. That's great. Any other comments? I almost think this should be like a standing item that we should have in the future to really kind of talk about like how we can connect the dots, and with looking at Christine with Denver Water and Julie with Xcel Energy, there's just a lot of like potential synergy that we could all work together on. John, is that your hand up again, or is that from before?
Sorry, from before. I'll take care of it.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss you. Okay. Well, we're getting close to 4 o'clock here, and want to see if there are any other updates from any other council members on any kind of final comments or items that weren't addressed earlier. And then you can think about it. And then I also want to see, since it's a public meeting too, I don't know if there's anyone from the general public as well. We like to invite the general public to make a comment as well. If there's any folks from the general public that are listening in that would like to make a comment, feel free to do so now. Going once. Going twice. Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Julie. I'd so move.
Okay, 2 minutes early, potentially.
This is Hillary. I'll second.
Okay, that motion's been made and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Does anyone think we shouldn't adjourn? Say no. Okay. Hey, thanks everyone. Really productive meeting. Really appreciate your involvement today, and look forward to collaborating with you on future discussions and future meetings. So thanks for your service. Thanks for being a part of this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Great leadership.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.